Welcome to the Pocket. I am your host, Scooter, and today we're going to be covering my AFC West offseason breakdown, biggest needs for each team filled and addressed one way, shape, or form. This is going to be the last division we've covered. I've covered every other division so far, so go check out those videos if you haven't seen them already and you're interested. Don't forget to drop a like on this one, and let's get right into it without further ado. Looking at the AFC West standings from last year. So the Chiefs finished 15-2. They really could have been 16-1, but they benched their starters versus the Broncos in the last week of the regular season, handing them a win to prevent the Bengals from getting into the playoffs. The Chiefs made it all the way to the Super Bowl as they typically do, but they lost this time to the Philadelphia Eagles, which left everyone quite shocked at how badly they lost. However, the rest of this division was quite a surprise to me this year. I wasn't too sure about the Chargers, Broncos, and Raiders. I projected them all to go 6-11. I did admit that I think maybe there's a chance one of them breaks out, but I didn't think there was a chance that two of them could finish above 500. Broncos and Chargers both finding success. What do you know? They were both the teams that had a quarterback on the roster, or at least a plan. I get the Raiders had Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, but that's a bridge. So not too surprised that the Raiders finished down there with four wins and 13 losses. So where does this land everyone in terms of the draft? Well, for the Chiefs, they're going to be all the way down there at 31. But then as you work your way up, you'll find the Chargers and the Broncos in your wild card losers tier. You have the Chargers at 22, the Broncos at 20, and then you go all the way up to the top 10, and you find the Raiders picking at 6. So pretty evenly spread out. I mean, there's no one in that middling tier who just barely missed the playoffs or anything, but this is a pretty spread out division. So unlike the NFC South, probably not expecting too many of these teams to sort of jump around and maneuver around each other, try to steal guys from each other. So should be pretty much all their own decisions. So let's get right into it and start with the Kansas City Chiefs. They have negative $3 million in cap space. I'm sure they can get over that, moving around some contracts. They picked 31 in the draft, as I said. And they're just sort of aging all over the place, offensively, defensively. They've got some free agents. Nick Bolton, they tagged Trey Smith, so offensive line should be coming back. But they do have needs, wide receiver, corner, safety. Like I said, this team is getting a little stale. It's aging a little bit on the offensive side, especially. Kelsey, not quite what he used to be in any way. And it's in question whether or not he is going to even play this year. So for me, offensive weapons, just in general, is going to be the biggest need. But I'm going to say number one, wide receiver. Like we mentioned before, they lost the Super Bowl this time. And last time that happened, they traded down. They gathered a bunch of picks and players. And then they got back to the Super Bowl, meaning it's not really impossible for them to recover from this. I don't think at all. I mean, the blowout loss to the Buccaneers looked really bad too. So they already did step one. They tagged Trey Smith, so they're bringing him back. So let's just assume they stay put at 31. I'm not going to mock something into the second round for what they're going to do. This pick is pretty much all they have to do to make a big splash. They don't have a lot of money. They're focused on retaining guys. So what are they going to do? Well, looking at the draft, I'm saying they need a number one wide receiver, and all of these guys are gone. Ted McMillan goes at all the way in the top 5. Luther Burden, and then you have guys like Emeka Egbuka, and then Matthew Golden, all gone. So who really would be that number one wide receiver for them? It's tough when you're picking down here this low and you're a successful team. You need one of the best wide receivers, but you pretty much stay and put. You would have a hard time moving up that high in the first round, and that receiver better hit if you do. So if they do stay put here at 31 and all those guys are gone, who do I suggest they take? I think they should take Jaden Higgins. He's 6'4", and he's about 215 pounds. So he definitely fits that X wide receiver role. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins, hoping that he could fulfill that. Couldn't get it done. But this guy's also got impressive speed. He ran a 4.47 at the combine, 39-inch vertical. So he's got hops, and that's going to fit that X role. And we've not really seen a wide receiver like this in the Chiefs offense. I mean, typically Kelsey has been the security blanket, the big body, the chain mover. But we haven't even seen a perimeter possession wide receiver, I think, in the Mahomes era. I mean, they had Tyreek Hill, and that was like their main wide receiver. Him and Kelsey was kind of all they really needed for the other guys to just kind of be role players. But now Tyreek's gone. Kelsey's aging, probably going to retire soon. So you really need to have something. You cannot just rely on Mahomes and Kelsey to get it done. So getting a guy like Jaden Higgins, I really like. There's lots of smaller wide receivers on the Chiefs already fulfilling those slot roles and stuff. But I feel like the Chiefs offense was super stale and limited because of that. They didn't really have a lot of different types of playmakers. And I feel like overall it eventually became predictable. If you had a good enough defense like the Eagles that could really lock in on what they were doing, uh, you know, be disciplined, tackle, let him take what you're going to give him, but generate pressure enough to the point that you disrupt those, chain moving plays, then you can beat this offense. But getting a guy like Jaden Higgins, I think it'll open up more explosiveness in the sense that it won't be all entirely dependent on a deep threat like Worthy, who, by the way, might not even be there next year because he's got a felony domestic violence case for strangling a family member. Didn't even seem like that type of guy. It really is crazy. But now you're gonna need a replacement for him too. So, and Rasheed Rice, it's like you're really losing everything. You really need this. So I think Jaden Higgins is the best option. He really is the best option available, but also I think the fit is good. I'd be interested to see what they can get out of a guy like him. Maybe even move him into the slot and use him a bit like a Kelsey as a big body on the inside of big slot. But I think as a perimeter X, he's going to fit that role well for them. Now that we've moved on from those losers, let's go back to the top of the draft and let's talk about what the Raiders are going to do at 6. For them, their big needs are running back, quarterback, not anymore. They just traded for Geno Smith, corner, safety, defensive tackle. Lots of that is due to pending free agents and stuff. They have a ton of cap space, $85 million and the 6th overall pick. They just acquired Geno, so they probably absorbed some of that contract. They definitely don't have $85 million anymore. Could try to figure out what's left, put it up there for you guys. But for me, their biggest need is going to be offensive weapons still. You just acquired Geno. He is what I'm considering a bridge guy, but the point of that is to build weapons around him, see what's working so that when you do move on from him, the next guy's walking into an already built situation and he doesn't have to, go through any of those growing pains that most young QBs have to. So this one kind of got spoiled for you guys. If you saw my Geno Smith trade reaction video, go check it out if you haven't seen it. But this is going to be probably one of my fastest, easiest takes. We know Pete Carroll joined the Raiders and how much he loves to run the ball. And he brought over Geno Smith. He's definitely trying to establish his culture and familiarity. Last year, the Raiders, they went best player available, and, they kind of missed out on quarterback. But since they did that, it worked out pretty well with Brock Bowers. He was supposed to be this generational tight end prospect. Everyone passed on him through 13 because 5 quarterbacks went. And what do you know? The Raiders end up with an all-pro guy who looks like the best tight end in the NFL already. Something similar could happen here if they take Ashton Jeanty. This offensive line is already pretty good. And like we mentioned, they already have a great tight end in Brock Bowers who can block and be a threat in the receiving game. So this is 2 guys now that you're having as versatile weapons around the line of scrimmage. That's going to create an incredible safety blanket mixed with that decent offensive line for Geno Smith. So this should be actually quite the change of pace from Seattle, where he had a good wide receiver duo. And yes, he did have Kenneth Walker, but I don't think Kenneth Walker is Ashton Jeanty. I'm just being for real. I get Ashton Jeanty hasn't played in the NFL yet, but that's just my stance. And Geno Smith is going to be able to take a different approach to offense with the addition of Jeanty, with a lot more play action, opening things up. Maybe they acquire another receiver. I'm not sure if I'm in love with Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker as your 1 and 2, but in the end of the day, I think adding Jeanty gives this team an identity. You have Brock Bowers, you have Ashton Jeanty. You like to run the ball. Pete Carroll's going to be all over it. And, the defense that Antonio Pierce left behind is going to love that energy. It's going to fit right into what they want to do. Keep the ball away from quarterbacks that make them uncomfortable when they get the ball back, with a defense that's fresh. And, they've had time to rest while the offense has been running the ball. I think this is a great plan for the Raiders. You typically have been down on the Raiders, viewed them as like the Jets or Browns, like they're never going to get better. And I get this is sort of like a bridge thing I'm describing it as, but I actually sort of like the upside of what this Raiders team could be. And maybe they could pull off what the Broncos and Chargers did last year and compete for a playoff spot. So that's your take for the Raiders, is that at 6, they should draft Ashton Jeanty. Up next, picking at 20, we will have the Denver Broncos. Their needs are going to be offensive weapons. They need an impact player They also have some, roles they could fill on defense. But to me, the defense was great last year. Don't even think about it in the first round unless if there is some stud falling. So offensive weapons who could be available at pick 20, it's a good question. I mean, the way I have it going right now, like I said, unofficial, but the wide receivers who would be gone by pick 20 would be the best one available, rather, I should say, is Emeka Egbuka and Jaden Higgins, along with Matthew Golden. So Matthew Golden certainly could be in consideration here. But the reason that I'm going to go away from him is I feel like Marvin Mims he already holds down that deep threat option. He was a very talented prospect. He made a lot of big plays last year. I really want to see him come back into that role. You also have Cortland Sutton outside as your X receiver. So you got two outside wide receivers. They're not like, elite alphas, but Cortland Sutton is good at what he does, and Marvin Mims is looking promising. So you could consider a slot wide receiver like Emeka Egbuka, but I would rather look at someone who's going to affect the offense more every single play than a slot wide receiver, especially if the targets are distributed around between all those wide receivers. I think you're going to get more of an impact out of running back. Now, Ashton Genty is gone, and typically this is a range where running back value gets very, very vague because you have lots of drafts where running backs don't even get taken until the second round, right? If they don't view someone as good enough, guys like JT in the class with Swift JT was taken in the second round. I think Swift was taken at I can't remember when the Lions took him, but nonetheless, you understand where I'm going with this. This is a very, very tricky spot. This pick will be remembered, and the Chargers, spoiler alert, they're looking for a running back too. So they're 2 picks ahead of them, and unless if the Chargers want to jump them, the Broncos are going to have the first take, the first jab at it. So is Sean Payton and his evaluation of the offense and Bo Nix going to consider that a workhorse running back will be more impactful than a slot wide receiver like Emeka Egbuka, even if he is amazing, or a speedster like Matthew Golden? I think yes. I think he's going to want a consistent player at running back, even though he does like to use a committee. I'm not saying he won't still rotate some guys in there, but I think right now he's going to look at Omari and Hampton and he's going to say, that's a workhorse running back we could use. Now, as I mentioned before, typically in years past, it's been like a Kamara Mark Ingram thing where they split roles, and they could also take the approach of waiting and trying to get, a solid role player, say a power back, and because you have guys like Jaleel McLaughlin to be the receiving backs. But Omari and Hampton is a special running back. I mean, he's not Ashton Genty, but if you just look at his combine and his measurables, he's got the workhorse frame, 6 foot, 221. 4.46 is great speed for that side. It's not like incredible. 18 reps on the bench is pretty good. He's pretty athletic with the broad jump and the vert, 38 inches. 4.4 on the 20-yard shuttle, but it's also the production that we saw in college, the explosiveness. I said he reminds me of DeMarco Murray, so I think getting a guy like that who can do a little bit of work in the receiving game, but you just switch him out every now and then for a guy like Jaleel to give him a little bit of a breather, I think would be a big difference maker to this offense. A big reason the Chargers were able to win in that game where they finished, with higher seeding because of it. I feel like if the Broncos had a better running back, they could have exposed the Chargers' weak run defense a lot more, and it ended up winning. It gives you more down-to-down consistency, allows Bo Nix to be a little more aggressive when he's passing because he knows he can lean on the run game to move the chains. So I really like this pick for the Broncos. I think Omari and Hampton's a great player too. I mean, I talk all the time about how running backs aren't valued high enough. Certain guys should not be drafted here, but you see the elite running backs have a significant impact, right? Whereas the average guys are what is proving to be like the waste of money, right? And it's no offense to running backs, but it's just the way it is that if you're a difference maker, you're a difference maker and you are worth it. But if you're not, then you really should be in more of a rotation and on a cheaper contract. So Broncos fill their need at running back and draft Omari and Hampton at 20. And finally, our last team. I might cry. Might cry. The Los Angeles Chargers. Oh man, I just mentioned how they have a need at running back, and they just got sniped by the Broncos. But they might even have a different philosophy. They got other needs too. They got a ton of cap space, but they need defensive tackle and edge, so that's going to be the whole defensive line. Interior offensive line, they have a fine tackle duo, and then they definitely need more wide receivers. They added Ladd McConkey last year, but he's not an alpha. He's definitely a high-quality slot wide receiver. But let's talk about what the Chargers should do. So like I said, it would kind of suck if you were them and you wanted Hampton and he got taken. He'd be a really good fit in this offense because the Chargers actually like to run the ball more than the Broncos. So it's going to stink, but they have the cap space. And like I said, they have other needs that they need to address. So they're going to start outside of running back and they're going to go for wide receiver, I think, in the in free agency pool. But they're not going to get like one of these elite, not elite, but more experienced veterans like Amari Cooper if he hits the market. I don't think they're going to go for a guy like Godwin. They already have Lad for the slot. So who do they go for? Well, I think a little bit of a sleeper wide receiver is Diami Brown. He's a vertical threat. He played for the Commanders last year. He made a lot of huge plays. I mean, it wasn't just Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin in the passing game. Diami Brown showed up in the playoffs big time. Also, it's the types of plays he makes are all super explosive. Great hands, great catches, full extension. He'll burn you after. He'll make a couple guys miss. And you just look at his profile too. He looks like pretty close to a number one wide receiver. Pretty a little bit skinnier, 6'1", 195. So you'd like him to be just maybe a tad heavier, maybe 10 pounds heavier to break some more tackles. But either way, I think pairing him with a guy like Lad McConkey allows you to really focus through the draft on getting the big boys where this draft is strong on the offensive and defensive side. So let's start off with that. Now, they released Joey Bosa, and I think that telegraphed this to me a little bit. And also with the Broncos taking Hampton, that they're really going to go for edge here. Their only other, good pass rusher is Khalil Mack, who's really, really aging, and he's not even under contract. They still have to re-sign him. So right here at 22, I'm going to have them going Michael Williams out of Georgia, super talented player, and, getting him onto this team with Jim Harbaugh where he can get coached up, I think is a very, very easy pick for them. He's probably fallen further than he really should. There's plenty of teams who need edge, but there's so many teams, so many needs. You just never know what's going to happen. Sometimes guys fall further than you think. So looking at his profile, you can see 6'5", 260 is a monster of a frame for a defensive end. Very, very strong, athletic, but the production not as much there because we've seen this happen from guys from Georgia. They get super traitsy guys like Trayvon Walker, and they're not fully developed. But when you're in college and you're that good of an athlete, you're gonna if you're projected to be a first round pick, and you're, but it's not because of your skill. You know that you're such a good athlete that you are just beating dudes based off of that, and that is a real thing that happens in the NFL too. I mean, athleticism translates, quickness does, strength. Strength in the terms of explosiveness, how quickly you can output that in guys like edge rushers, it translates. So I think the Chargers getting him here helps secure the future. You got a guy like Khalil Mack, who is also a very similar frame, a little bit shorter, 6'3", but 260. So he's got a little bit of that power rush that you can help teach him. And I think that's a great move for the Chargers, help improve the defense, get after guys like Mahomes, other elite quarterbacks in the conference. I think this is a good move for them. So that concludes the mini series, my offseason breakdown. Biggest need for every team, division by division. Every single one of them covered. Man, guys, we got it done before March 10th when these negotiations are going to start, and then March 12th when the signings will actually occur. If you guys have watched every single one of these videos, or this is just your first one, I appreciate you so much for tuning in. This offseason has been pretty fun so far. Excited wrapping up my first offseason series. This was pretty dope. So looking forward to doing some mock drafts, before the draft comes around. Probably just one, but there's some other stuff I want to start covering in the offseason, like my Giants full offseason plan, what I think the Giants should do. That is the team I'm a fan of. Hearing some rumors about Kyler Murray getting traded or things like that. So lots of interesting stuff to come up, lots of interesting things to talk about. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the other ones. And tell me in the comments, do you think the Broncos are going to be bold enough to take Omari and Hampton at 20? Or do you think that they're going to kind of distribute and get, just a rollback later on in the draft and focus on other needs? All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, this concludes the series. Stay tuned for the next video. Should be Giants offseason overview. And I'll see you guys then. Peace out.